and welcome to the meeting of the Board of Selectmen for March 18, 2014. I'm Dennis Cohane, along with my fellow selectmen Tom Hurley and Katie Conlon, Town Administrator Emery Fagan, and Executive Secretary Paula Rizzi. The first item on the agenda is the approval of meeting minutes for March 4, 2014.
Move approval of the minutes for March 4, 2014.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Number 3 is the future meeting dates. So I guess we're meeting next week. Are we meeting next week, Emery?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you need to meet next Thursday, March 27th, to approve the warrant and also to approve your comment letter for the 40B, the Randolph Ave 40B project.
Okay. So that's the 27th, Thursday the 27th. After that, we have April 1st, 15th, and 22nd. So far, everybody good with that?
The
Yes.
15th is going to be tough for me.
It is actually
Ooh, yeah.
next day.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to do the 15th.
Okay, we'll change that. We can
Okay.
revisit it at a future meeting.
So can we confirm April 1st and the 22nd for now?
Yeah, that's fine.
And then we can maybe come up with a date in between.
Sounds good.
And while
Okay.
we're on the topic of meetings, why don't we just mention that the Master Plan Committee is having their next roundtable discussion on Tuesday, the 25th, at Tucker School from 7 to 9. And they invited the public to attend, so give them a public service announcement, right?
It's a good plug, like that. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the payroll and vendor warrants.
Move approval of the payroll and vendor warrants.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Number 4 is citizen speak. Anyone here for citizen speak? We have some people. Come on up. Hello.
How are you?
Keith?
Long time no see, I guess.
You could identify yourself for the public, please.
I'm Keith Mills. I reside at 39 Hawthorne Road in Milton. I also own a street event at 25 Central Ave. I guess for the citizen speaks, I came up to talk a little bit about what we talked about last week, although I'm not going to reiterate everything that I said, other than I still opposed it, as it stays. I guess what thought that I just wanted to put out there, it seems really important, if not crucial, that how the selectmen, the town, whomever respond to the 40B is really what it's all about. And the crafting of the words and the smithmanship that needs to go along with that, it just seems, in listening to everybody talk about it, it just seems really important. I guess, I'm here to say if there's anything that I can do, or Peter Mullen or Peter Jackson or anything can do in helping with that or being part of it, we're there. Of course, it's easy for me to speak for both Peter with their not being here, but I feel that I can. So I guess I just kind of want to offer that. It was also interesting that I learned that it appears that once the state makes a decision on this, that there's really nothing that we can do about it. And I spoke to a couple of other people about it, and that was their general impression as well, to which then, it kind of, to me, flies in the face of kind of what democracy is all about, checks and balances, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way that, someone can come in who doesn't live in the town, doesn't work in the town, and can kind of mandate what they think is best for us. And I guess, my thought was, is it worth it at some point in time? Do we want to talk to Brian or,
Brian being?
Brian Joyce or Dan Callahan or any of the other people who represent us to maybe, is this something that, legislatively we should get together and talk about, and maybe a bill can be introduced or something? Again, I just kind of don't like the notion of, it's our way or the highway, so to speak, the way that the state, comes down to it. And it just doesn't seem to be fair to municipalities and us for people to come in and dictate what they think is better for us just because they have a number to meet or quota to do. And again, I don't think any of us are against 40B or whatever it is. I think it's just how it can be force-fed to us, and I just don't like that. I guess the only other thing that I would say to it is out of all the, I don't know whether you want to call it testimony or discussions that were offered last week, there was only one person that was in favor of it. It was somebody that was being paid by Conley and somebody that's not even from the town. So again, I just kind of want to kind of reinforce the fact that, we're not for it the way that it is, and that we'd like to see, we'd like to see a better 40B or something better done there. And that's basically all that I wanted to say. So thank you for your time, and, you know, I'm glad we have you, because I certainly couldn't do what you're doing.
Thanks, Keith. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Anyone else to citizen speak? Margaret? Hello.
Excuse me. Margaret Donovan, 41 Central Avenue. I'm here to speak on 2 items on the agenda. I'm sorry I was not able to make the public hearing, to attend the public hearing on 131B, the 40B project. I'm also sorry that I missed the meeting, which had the taxi cab fare increase on the agenda, because I would have come up right after that other person who spoke at Citizen Speak to speak very much in favor of that company and also in favor of the increase. I don't know if, I see it's on the agenda, but I don't know if somebody's here to speak to it. Is somebody here?
They are here, yep.
They are here, okay. All right, you recall that I, at a previous meeting, tried to give you a little bit of background on the Central Avenue Business District, and especially my family's involvement in it that goes back many, many years, with the purchase of the carriage house that's now my house. You recall that I mentioned to you that my father had a cab stand, a portable office that was stationed right outside of the Henry's building, in addition to the one he had in Mattapian Square, both leased from what was then called the MTA, today called the MBTA. The cab stand that was office, it was an office, heated, that was located right outside of Henry's, was open to the public. It was not manned per se, but there was a telephone in there. So if there was not a cab sitting in front of the place, that the person could go in and call, and a cab would soon arrive. Life then, times then, were much simpler than they are today. But the business itself is brutal. And I can tell you that my father was going to try to teach me the business. I was, one of my past career opportunities was being a teacher at the time. And so he was trying to teach me the business so that I could carry on when his brother left because of serious health issues. And so I'd go down to Mattapian Square, go into the cabs, and the cabs were lined up with their Boston cab medallions, and the cab drivers were all there thinking that I was there spying on them, because one of the situations that does occur with owning a cab is that the drivers go out. I'm sure it's been corrected since those times, especially with, well, they had the odometer back then too, but it was always, this hand goes into the pocket for my father, and this fare goes into the pocket for the driver. And that's the way it was. My father certainly knew that that was going on. It wasn't a lot, but every now and then. But he ignored it. He ignored it for a reason, because it was so difficult to get drivers to drive those cabs. Another headache. And of course, they all wanted a job when they were short of money, but when he needed them, they were nowhere to be found. The cabs were not theirs, were not their own cars. So since that was a situation, it was crash, nick, dent. And those cabs, the Mattapian ones and the Milton ones, were at what is now Steel and Rye, more than they were on the road. Steel and Rye back then was William Ahern's Chrysler Plymouth car agency. He sold cars, and he had an auto body shop. And he had a great superintendent of that auto body shop that we all got to know well, Vinnie Nelson. Vinnie's wife, Harriet, just died recently. But anyway, the cars were there more than they were on the road, because they didn't belong to the drivers. Next. As you know, if you go and rent a car from our rental agency, enterprise budget, Hertz, you better have insurance, and you better have insurance that covers loss of opportunity. In other words, if you get into an accident and that car is tied up to be repaired, you, as the driver, are liable for that. And some insurance up here covers that, some do not. Expense. So naturally, you have to have a huge insurance bill and huge deductible, another expense. And not all insurance companies will take will take cabs. Liberty Mutual did, but of course, you paid extremely high premiums in order to have them do that. Then, of course, the cabs don't last forever because they are abused by the drivers, not intentionally, of course, but each one is out to make the fare. And so the cost of purchasing new cars and the stenciling is another cost to the business. My father should really have had stock in William Ahern's Chrysler Plymouth dealerships because it costs so much money to have those cars. First of all, to buy them, and then to have them repaired. Then there were legal fees. I remember going to a restaurant in Boston in a place it was called Brandy Pete's, and it was very similar to Durgan Park's. And I'm with friends, and I'm sitting opposite a man who said, "And I know you." And I said, "Oh, I'd hope to go out on a Friday night and not be known, but I know you." And it was, actually, he was a lawyer from this town, since deceased. His wife is still living. And he proceeded to tell me, he said, "You are Margaret Donovan, and you are a graduate of Manhattanville College, the Sacred Heart." I almost croaked. I mean, here I am going to a public place, not wanting to be, just wanting to be anonymous and have a good time. And so turned out, he was my father's lawyer for all these lawsuits that he got from all these accidents that these drivers had. Add in the registration fees. At least in Milton, you're not charging, you don't have to get Boston Cab medallions. But there are town fees and there are registry of motor vehicle fees. Then we come to the gasoline. And with the fluctuation of the price, it's usually higher rather than lower. He then was concerned about the safety and protection of his drivers, so he wouldn't be able to get away with it today. He would not allow his drivers, his dispatchers, to have the drivers go north of a certain road in Mattapian because it was not safe. So that was lost opportunity. Now, I have used Milton Cab. The phone number is almost the same, except back then there was not this 617. I use it to go to Logan Airport when I carry 2 suitcases. Other than that, I use the T with my carry-on. I have found Milton Cab to be prompt, not only prompt, to be early. One time they were out there 10 or 15 minutes before the scheduled time, and I usually have them pick me up at 8:30 to make a morning flight in JetBlue, and honk the horn. I ran out and said, "Please don't honk the horn." I said, "I know you're here, but I don't want the rest of the world to know that I'm going to be out of town." They were not only on time, they were early. So I just believe that if someone has a complaint about a service of any business in this town, they should go through the channels, the proper channels first, and not air it out in public, as that speaker did that time. I know that my father would probably, he ran a very successful business. I'm sure he would have felt very uncomfortable coming before you. This is a board. I mean, you don't look as though you're going to attack us, but there you are looking very professional with your laptops in front of you. And you don't have to do as much speaking as we do, which you probably say good. So I just wanted to mention that because I felt so bad that I wasn't here to be able to come up and say that at the time that person was being criticized, and especially because he was scheduled to be and to speak here right after being chastised publicly by that person at Citizen Speak, but also to be following the chief of police. Who would want that? So I feel very bad about what happened, but I also feel bad about the bad rap that the Milton Cab Company got, because I use them every time I fly out of here with JetBlue. Okay. Having said that, now I'm on to the subject dear and close to my heart, just around the corner, 131 Elliott Street. I know that you missed me at the public hearing, that I was not able to attend, but I thought, I'm kidding, of course, but I thought that Peter Mullen, Peter Jackson, Ellen Denoya, and Keith Mills did a terrific job in their presentation before you. I think they articulated all their concerns very well. There was frankly nothing more that I could have added. Their comments were thoroughly researched. I'm going to talk about something. I'm going to reiterate the main concern that you had before you about that project, and never mind the fact that it's a monstrous-looking building, but there is a parking problem. And the parking problem, until that situation is addressed, I don't see how you, as a Board of Selectmen, the planning board, or the town meeting can require any commercial units in that building. And that is not to say that I am supporting 40B, which doesn't have them. Believe me, I'm not. But I'm also concerned about any more commercial units going up and around there because of what I see on a daily basis and have to experience on a daily basis down in that area. I'm sorry I wasn't able to accompany you on your walk through last Thursday. I hadn't bought my hard hat yet, but I noticed before I left to go to a meeting that I had to attend that you were parking in the, not you personally, but there were people parking in the on the Henry's site. Do you know what it would be like on a Thursday otherwise to be parking in that street Friday and a Saturday? It's a nightmare. There aren't any spaces.
Is that your main issue, Margaret? Parking?
Yes, parking.
Yeah? Okay.
Parking. So, what I am saying, you're not cutting me short, are you, Mr. Chair?
A little bit. But go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I didn't get a chance to
We
speak.
have a long meeting ahead of us.
And what I want to let you know is
Yeah.
36 Central. Okay, this is for the 40B. 36 Central, they do not go to the T to go to work, that I can see. Now, I'm not down there doing the traffic study, but I'm in the neighborhood, as you know, so I can see coming and going. So I see cars coming out of 36 Central in the morning at go to work time, and I see them driving back in late afternoon. I have yet to see anyone from that complex get on the T to go to work. The Mass Housing Partnership thinks that getting on the T is what everybody's going to do. They're not doing it there. And there's 3 commercial units. The middle one was set to be the office unit. For 2 years, they were not able to sell that. So now the Moores are taking it over as their place. Do they park in the back? No, they park out in the street with the trucks and so on. Each of those commercial spaces, the 3 of them, are supposed to have 4 parking spaces in the back. 1 for the owners and 3 others for shared parking. The customers all park out in the street. And they do not go around the back of park. They park out in the street. They are competing for spots with all the other businesses in the area that lost the parking when the town lost the opportunity to purchase that lot and keep the municipal parking there. Until you get to mandate parking down in that area, I don't see how you can say, put in some more commercial units, because there's no place for the people to park. So I know that that's not part of the 40B, but that's a consideration that should be in the back of this board's mind as it goes forward with was I short enough?
Some very good points, Margaret, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Anyone else for citizen speak? Okay. Number 6 on the agenda is the Henry's discussion. And I'd like to invite up Joe Prondak, our building commissioner, town council, Brandon Moss.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Joe?
Joe Prondak, Building Commissioner.
Brandon Moss, Office of the Town Council.
Hi, Brandon.
Hi, Joe.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to discuss the disposition of the privately owned building at 131 Elliott Street, known as the Hendry's Ice Cream Plant, and to recommend that the board take action under Mass General Laws, Chapter 139, to consider whether or not to require the owner to either repair or remove that building. And the primary reason for this is the fact that it is a dilapidated structure. It is a danger to it presents a danger to the public. We've noted that in numerous fashions since 2012, and the building continues to get worse, and no appreciable action has been taken by the owners of that building to keep it safe and to protect the public, and therefore I make this request.
And Joe, you condemned the building before,
In July of 2012,
and no action was taken, obviously.
no action has been taken.
Was there ever an application for a demolition permit?
There was an application for a demolition permit submitted simultaneously with an appeal to the condemnation order, which
That was the same day, was it?
right around the same day, yeah.
Yeah. There are some environmental issues, so obviously you need all of that work done before the demolition permit can be issued. Has any environmental work been done, to your knowledge?
None has been undertaken, to my knowledge, no. A survey has been done on the building as to see what's in the building, and although I have not seen it, I've been told that that work was done sometime over the past year.
Can you just explain a little bit of the condition of the building, just so you
Well,
get an idea of how
the privately owned portion of the building is I'm going to guess, about 20 to 25,000 square feet. There's multiple portions of the building, as it was a building that was added on to a number of times over the years. So there's portions of the building that are made of wood, portions that are made of brick, portions that are made of steel. There is the wood portion, which is the oldest portion, is adjacent to the town-owned portion of the building, and also a small portion of the building that's possibly owned by CSX Railway. That building has suffered a substantial collapse, where the roof has collapsed onto the second floor has collapsed onto the first floor. And then there's a larger portion of the privately owned building that is to the westerly portion of the building, which is all the way up Elliott Street. It's a tall steel building with a steel roof, and the roof is rotted out completely. If you stand in that building, you can look right up at the sky.
The steel beams are rotted?
The steel deck on that roof is
Steel
rotted.
deck.
So in order for the steel deck to rot through, the weather has had to have had an effect on the steel beams. If the steel deck is rotted that badly, then naturally the steel beams that are holding that deck up are rotted as well. It's about 60 feet in the air, so it's impossible to get up to actually examine the condition, but it's a fairly obvious condition. So what happens, my concern there as building inspector is, we all know the proximity of that building to the active T-line, and there's a masonry wall adjacent to the T-line in that building, in that portion of the building that I just described. From a structural aspect, the roof of that building essentially is what holds the walls up. So when you lose the strength of the roof, you lose the strength of the walls simultaneously. So there is a risk there of a collapse or other failure on that building.
And we have a structural engineer's report on the building, correct?
We have two opinions from a structural engineer. When the town first brought out a structural engineer, his name was Clem McCory from EDG of Medford. In the time that we've been dealing with this building, Clem has retired, and his associate has taken over, and they've each done reports independently. And also the privately owned portion of the building, they've had their own engineers look at the building. And all of the reports in total say that the building needs attention.
And Joe,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Katie, sorry.
And Joe, you've been out a couple of times recently. Your memo said November and I think January.
Yes.
Have you noticed the building getting worse during the course of the winter? Has it stayed the same? What's your
I've
impression?
noticed that the portion of the building where the actual collapse has taken place, the collapse continues to expand in a direction more towards the privately owned portion of the building, into 131 Elliott Street. And then the steel roof that I've discussed, the holes continue to get bigger and the deterioration continues, and that's obvious from a simple cursory walkthrough of the building.
Did the owners of the Henry's building, their structural engineer, did that match our structural engineer's report?
It
Was
was,
it the same or was it different?
it was different, but it didn't directly address the risk of danger to the public. It simply boiled down, it simply states that the building can be fixed. We all know that the building can be fixed. And now that was done over a year ago, so no action has been taken to
That's
correct that.
important. So they said it can be fixed, but did they say it was structurally broken?
Yes, it does note portions of the building that need to be repaired, that need attention. And that was the second private engineer that Conley's hired. The first private engineer was a little more direct in that he said the building, the wood frame portion of the building needs to be repaired in short order. And that was well over a year ago.
Okay, so in essence, we have 4 structural engineer reports,
Yes.
2 from each party. Okay. And
So the procedure that we're recommending under Mass General Laws, Chapter 139, you would first hold a public hearing, you would invite the private party to come. I would testify at that hearing. The private party would have...
right here, at this,
Right here at this...
yep, at this room, yeah?
Private owner would have the right to say whatever they wanted, and then the board would make a determination as to whether to direct further action by that owner.
So, Mr. Chairman, can we have Mr. Moss
Yes.
give us a little bit of brief information about the process?
Exactly, Chapter 139.
Yes.
What
so-
is it?
So under Chapter 139, Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3, they basically prescribe a procedure for the board to, based on the report of the building commissioner here tonight, to make a determination, preliminary determination that the building is dilapidated and/or dangerous and potentially a nuisance to the neighborhood. Following that, the property owner is given some level of notice. I recommend giving him approximately 2 weeks' notice to be back here before this board. He can be heard. He can bring witnesses. The board can hear from the building commissioner, can also receive into evidence the structural engineer reports, the 4 that were referred to, as well as the most recent report from March 14th. And from that, the board can make a determination as to whether or not the building has been adjudged and to prescribe the specific action that needs to be taken.
What report on March 14th?
That's my most recent report.
Your report?
Yes.
Okay.
And so based on that, the owner would be given an opportunity to either secure the building or to have the building demolished. And if not, then the town would take appropriate action, which could be taking it upon itself, or the town could be taking the owner into litigation to seek an injunction to require those actions to be taken.
Okay.
And under this Chapter 139, it's a law that would either require demolition or repair, correct?
Correct, but not to leave it in its current condition, which is exposed.
Okay. We ordered the building down, then the owners of 131 Elliott Street no doubt will appeal it.
Right.
What's the procedure after the appeal?
From the procedure within the appeal is that the town has the ability to ask the court as part of that litigation to have, at least for the time being, to have the building made safe, to be secured. Ultimately, to basically have the court enforce the order of the town if the owner does seek to challenge it.
And what I would expect, my memo of March 14th is a brief synopsis of what's going on. I would expect that at the hearing I would give a much more detailed report.
Brandon, how does this differ from a condemnation, or is it basically a condemnation?
It's basically a type of condemnation. There's different procedures in the law. This just happens to be a procedure that allows the board to make a determination relying on the evidence received for dangerous or dilapidated buildings.
And this is a different procedure than the one that was taken a couple of years ago.
It was. That procedure involved basically requiring access to the property and having a survey board review it based on an appointment of 3 individuals. This basically puts the power within the selectmen. There is some overlap between the two. They both have the ability to seek relief from the order, but this is a little bit more of a direct process.
Well, the condition of the building has certainly been a concern for this board, for prior boards, and it's been in the condition that it's been in for a long time, and it's getting worse. And the winter weather has been a concern for a number of months. So I do think we should go forward with this process.
I mean, Joe, you did bring out some experts to this building
Yes.
who made the same determination that it's almost ready to collapse, basically.
There are portions, there's a portion that has collapsed, there are other portions that are subject to collapse. It could
Partially
happen at
collapsed.
any time.
Dilapidated.
Certainly open to the weather. As I've said before, the building gets worse with each raindrop.
Right.
We'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing under the auspices of Mass General Law, Chapter 139, regarding the condition of the property at 131 Elliott Street, and to determine whether or not to order corrective action on the property by its owners.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving on to item number 7 on the agenda is the taxi fare increase, Milton taxi fare increase. I'd like to bring up Joseph Sinkowitz.
Mr. Chair, I do have a spreadsheet that if we could put it up, is that possible to do?
You do have a spreadsheet?
Yeah. that-
First of all, Mr. Sinkowitz, again, our condolences to your friend and your partner,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Tempesti,
Yes.
and to his family as well. You pass that along from all of us here.
Thank you.
You want to put the spreadsheet up now, Tom?
Do you have a flash drive? It's probably easy to put on yours, or?
Well, can you just talk about it
I
instead
can
of?
talk about it, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to talk about without actually seeing it. But do you want to read the motion in first, or
Sure.
we can have discussion?
Okay, well, then, for purposes of discussion, I will move that we adopt a not-to-exceed taxi rate for all taxis licensed by the town of Milton to become effective immediately, $2.60 for the first 1/7 of a mile, 40 cents for each additional 1/7 of a mile, and $28 per hour waiting time.
Okay, and I'll second the motion.
So the motion was made and seconded. We're now in discussion.
So, obviously, it's been since 2004, and clearly, inflation and everything else has gone up since 2004.
I think it's been 2003, actually.
It was a 2004 vote, I believe, wasn't it?
Three, I think,
Okay,
yes.
all right, so
So it's 11 years, yeah.
so it's been a while. So basically, I do have a spreadsheet that kind of, because it was difficult to try and analyze this compared to other towns' rates. First of all, if you look at other towns, their rates might be 2 or 3 years old now, and nothing really compares. Some of them have, standing rates for the, so the meter just starts with a number as opposed to the first 7th or, so to try and compare one town to another is virtually impossible.
Should we back up for a minute, Tom, and just mention that the research I think you're working from is, the town administrator had some, I think probably Tricia in the office, contacted some other towns.
Correct.
Though we often reach out for comparison purposes too, and to get some other data as to what the rates are in other towns. And we're finding that there's a lot of different approaches to this, and that they're not all uniform, so.
Right.
Okay.
So again, what I have done is just taken the consumer price index, what a dollar would buy back then compared to what a dollar would buy today, and it's about a 1.24% change. So if you apply that and convert everything else,
It seems a little exact, It's not about,
it's actually 1.24, and it goes on and on and on, so it's 1.23 something. So if you take all that and convert it, I don't have it up yet, but let me, hang on, my computer. So it should be on there now.
Can I say something real quick, or should I
Sure,
wait?
go ahead. Well, we'll go.
Basically, what we're looking for, just to simplify, is the same rates as Quincy. Those are the exact same rates as Quincy.
Okay.
Okay, just.
I think
that
you let us at
simplifies
Quincy
things.
and Boston, is that right?
Boston might even be a little higher.
Could.
Boston might be a little higher. But he wants to, because the same company, we have cabs in Quincy also,
Right.
in Milton, okay? So he
Yeah,
was
we're
just
aware
looking-
of that,
Okay, okay.
Okay, so.
We just
so-
happen to have an accountant on the
Okay,
board.
that's okay.
So where we're starting here is the rates requested are $2.60 for the first 7th mile. Each additional each 7th mile is 40 cents, and then a $28 waiting time. So then if you move down a little bit on the spreadsheet, so I really just took the current rates with the current multiplier, so $1.70, converted to a mile, because you got to compare apples to apples. So if you take the current rate of $1.70 for a quarter mile, convert it to a mile, it's $6.80. Inflate it by 1.24, so it inflates up to $8.43 for a mile, and then bring it back down to 1/7 of a mile, it comes to $1.20. So that one is kind of out of whack with the 260. You know, it's way, the 260 is way above inflation. But if you do the same thing to the each additional mile, the inflated amount is 43 cents for each
There at
additional
40.
eighth compared to 40 cents. Pretty much right on board. The waiting time, if you inflate the $24 waiting time up to today's rates, it comes to $29.76 compared to the requested 28. So again, pretty much right on. The next thing I did was, okay, let's take a 3-mile taxi trip under the old rates, under the new rates. So if you take that 3-mile taxi trip under the old rates, it would come to $8.30. And then if you inflate it by 1.24, it comes to $10.29. If you take that 3-mile taxi trip under the proposed rates, it comes to $10.60. So again, I guess it more or less proves that although that first 1/7 of a mile, I think, is high, because it's only a 1/7 of a mile, and everything else is kind of in line, that
It works.
it's within reason compared to inflation.
That's good to know.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tom.
Okay.
I don't know if you want me to say anything. I'm basically here, I guess, to
Yeah.
answer any questions you may have,
Right. What,
any suggestions you may have.
well, the motion was made and seconded, but we're in the comment period. I'm not sure if you're aware of some complaints that we received.
I was here 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Okay.
And we were just wondering if you could just look into those and clean it up a little bit. We're hearing about your taxis being untidy and showing up late for appointments and stuff like that. Although I have a good story. I have a positive story, and Margaret Dunham will be real happy. My wife was going to the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning recently. Storm the night before. Steep driveway. Milton Taxi showed up on time, but couldn't get out of my driveway. Couldn't get back up. And she was catching a plane, and she was going to be late. So she backed her own four-wheel drive car out, asked the taxi driver to jump in with her, drove to the airport, threw the taxi driver her keys, and said, "Please bring the car back to my garage. I'm trusting you." And he did.
Thank you.
He brought the car back and eventually got his own car out of it. So that's a good news story for Milton
Nice
Taxi,
story.
you know?
If I could just address the complaints, obviously, we get hundreds, between Quincy and Milton, hundreds and hundreds of calls a day, hundreds of calls a day. And unfortunately, we do get some complaints.
Right.
And when we get them, we do try to address them aggressively and in fact, quickly. You know, we do try to address them right away
Right.
and aggressively. We don't like the complaints, but we do get some complaints, unfortunately. And as far as the car cleanliness, we very aggressively trying to keep these drivers to keep the car clean, more so now than before. We really will.
Right.
That is a concern, and I understand that concern.
I mean, I could say the same thing. I've used Milton Cab, and I've used the Marina Bay as your,
Marina Bay, yeah, right?
yeah, I used them a couple of weeks ago, and they did a great job.
Right.
There on time, got me to the airport, and I had no complaints, so.
Right. I mean, most of our stories that we get back are good. It's just that if we have a complaint, we feel obligated to tell you
Get
as
some.
well.
And we do try to take care of them right away.
Right, good. All right.
One thing I mentioned to the town administrator, and she stepped out of the room, but the taxi regulations that we have go back to 1987, and we should probably just take a look at, I think essentially just ask the police department, which interacts with the taxi companies to take a look at the regulations, see if there's anything they want to recommend. Anne Marie, I was just mentioning that the taxi regulations go back to 1987, and we would just ask the police
you wanna
department
come up?
to take a
We'll-
look.
We'll actually bring Chief Wells up
Okay,
as
but
well.
let me finish my point. I'd like to just have the regs looked at to see if there's anything we need to address, update. There may be nothing, but because they are fairly old, we should see if there's anything that we'd like to make changes. And there's no rush in that, but we could bring that back at a later date.
Good point.
We will review those and update them. I'll work with the police department.
Yeah, because
Good evening, Chief.
even I had a look. I didn't know how old they were. Basically, in a short, under the regulations now, we look at we look at it two ways: the drivers, which is the licensed hackney operators, and then the vehicles. With regard to the drivers, every driver has to go through a full Cory check to get the license. Every year, and they come up, it's in April, we do it in the spring, we do a full inspection of the vehicle. With that, gets another full spin of every hackney driver, so that's his Cory, his driver's history, any warrants, anything like that. The vehicle must come in already passed through the state safety, having inspection, stiction, emissions, all of that. And then once that's done, then we do a complete top to bottom of the vehicle, mechanically, seat belts, all the safety equipment it's supposed to have. And then we bring in Mark Kelly at the same time, and he is the sealer, weights and measures. He does all of the, what do you call it?
Meters.
The meters, yeah, in the cab, certifies them all, because there have been cases, we don't have a lot of issues at all. We don't, like yourselves, we don't get a lot of complaints. And to your point, I said this today, because just like in Cory and driving changes since '87, there's definitely might be things that we want to look at differently. So as far as, there was a lot brought up about cleanliness. We had a lot of discussions with Lieutenant Cherry, Lieutenant Al, and myself. They do that when they do the inspections. I just don't know how we could get into doing spot inspections. We don't get we really don't. Considering the number of runs they do, the complaints are minimal.
That's good to
The
hear.
number of runs they do.
Thank you, Chief.
So we'll look at it, update it, and I'll send it over for approval.
Yeah, I don't think there's any rush on it, and it's not really directed at cleanliness or tidiness of the cabs. It's really directed at, has anything changed in the last, so many years that we need to add to our taxi regulations?
That's a good point.
And we are trying to be more aggressive with the cleanliness. We really are, because, you know what I mean? We have a few small complaints, so we are on the drivers more so to keep them clean.
Very good.
Please, too, if you see something that in that when you read it, just bring it to my attention. Okay, thanks.
Any further comment?
No?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
So we're all set?
You're all set.
Okay,
Thank
thank you very
you.
much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And number 8 on the agenda is the unknown, unbilled sewer charge policy. And this is the final draft of the policy. Do you have a copy, Anne Marie?
Yes, I do,
I
Mr.
actually don't
Chairman.
have one with me.
Here.
Assuming everybody read it.
Yes.
Are you content, Tom, with the
I'm
appeals?
fine with the appeals part of it,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. I am too. Katie, did you have any comment on it? Or you-
Nothing further. I was content with it last week, but we've added to the appeals process, and I think we've made some improvements, and it's a good policy, and Joe and the DPW are working hard on this. People should be aware of that, and
Thanks, Margaret. Okay.
this will help them to move the process along.
So we don't have a motion on this, or do we just?
I will move that we approve the policy regarding previously unknown sewer connections and non-billed sewer accounts.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. It's good to get that going.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Okay, number 9 on the agenda is the MAPC South Shore Consortium contract extensions. And these are road works, catch basin cleaning for the town of Milton contracts.
I will move to approve the following one-year extensions for Public Works Engineering Service contracts for roadway, sidewalk improvements under Chapter 90 through the South Shore Consortium. T.L. Edwards, Inc., item number 1, roadway management. Capone Brothers, Inc., item 1B, sidewalk construction, second extension. Seal Coating, Inc., item 4, roadway surface sealing, treatments, microsurfacing. Super Sealant Inc., item 5B, crack filling, modified asphalt fiber reinforcement compound. Markings Inc., item 6, pavement markings. Bartlett Consolidated LLC, item 7, guardrail. Truax Corporation, items 9A, C, D, E, and F, catch basin cleaning services. RJ Gabriel Construction Company, Inc., item 9B, catch basin cleaning disposal by contractor. Capital Waste Services, item 11, debris disposal, second extension. LaRusso Corporation, item 12, pavement trench patch repairs. Northeast Traffic Control, item 13, street name signs and posts, second extension.
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
I'm glad you drew that one as well. You seem to draw the long motions.
I know.
Any comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. Number 10 on the amended agenda is the signage request. 2 signage requests, one for Thatcher Montessori and the Garden Club.
So I'll move that we approve a temporary signage request from the Montessori School, 1425 Blue Hill Avenue, to display information on its property announcing the school's new turf field being constructed this spring.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
And I'll also move that we approve a request from the Milton Garden Club to display temporary signage from April 26th through May 10th, announcing its annual perennial sale. It will take place on May 10th, 2014, at the Milton Public Library.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Just one comment on the first one. Do we have a length of time of that sign is going to be, or is it just going to be the
The
statutory
banners
period?
are limited to 45 days.
45 days?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, number 11 on the agenda is we have a request to open and close a special town meeting warrant. I'd like to invite up Ned Corcoran. Good evening.
Good evening,
Good evening,
Mr.
Ned.
Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Welcome. If you could introduce yourself and then tell us what you're looking for.
My name is Ned Corcoran. I am here on behalf, I'm an attorney here on behalf of Thayer Nursery, Maggie and Josh Oldfield. The board may be aware there was a citizen's petition that was filed on behalf of Thayer Nursery dealing with the proposed reintroduction of the landscaping business, their property on Hillside Street. The planning board conducted several nights of public hearing on that article, the outcome of which Alex Whiteside in particular undertook a complete redrafting of the proposed bylaw, which in his opinion, and I would agree, is a much tighter set of controls should town meeting vote to approve the proposed bylaw. It is of such a significant change that it is a question whether the bylaw whether Alex's draft could be introduced as an amendment to the bylaw as it has been presented for the warrant. So in that regard, we've secured well over 100 signatures for a new citizen's petition to be presented to town meeting as part of the special meeting we understand is going to take place within the annual. In fact, we get something like 250 signatures over the weekend to present this new form of article to town meeting.
Yeah, has the planning board looked at this at all yet, or?
The new?
Yeah, the new one. I know they haven't heard it yet, but.
Well, Alex Whiteside drafted it, and
So it is
it's his drafting.
Okay.
He presented it at the third night of the public hearing, which took place this last Thursday.
Okay.
The planning board voted that evening to refer the existing article voted to recommend that the article that is currently on the annual town meetings warrant to be recommitted to the planning board for study. with the expectation that the new article would be taken up and potentially could be approved at town meeting. They will have to conduct a new public hearing on the new article, which, depending on timing and advertising, would either take place on April 9th or April 24th. Presumably sooner is better, so that they have a chance to formulate their recommendation in time to give it to the warrant committee for the formulation of its recommendation.
And I'm assuming this amendment is incorporating houses around the farm and, unlike did the first one incorporate houses into the amendment?
No, and neither one does. What it
The
does
article?
is in this case, it incorporates other landscaping businesses in the town. And it basically provides that a landscaping business which has been in business as of 2012 with
With a special permit.
with a special permit.
Does anybody else meet that?
Yeah, Bonnie Thomas, Eagle Farms.
Okay.
They're all potentially at risk to an abutter or abutters claiming that they're operating beyond the scope of what would be allowed under a special permit for a nursery business. So in essence, it would allow other landscapers currently operating to take advantage of the new bylaw, sort of be codified under a new special permit process. It is very tight in terms of the types of plans that have to be presented, the conditions that would be imposed with respect to time of day, number of vehicles, et cetera, how a landscaping operation would be conducted in accordance, and it would provide for an initial 3-year review of the operation under a special permit that may be granted, or sooner if the planning board thought sooner would be necessary, and then 5-year renewal. So it wouldn't just be a grant of a permit and then you're off ad infinitum to operate as you would deem fit. So it helps the town retain a much tighter set of controls and review over operations. And that's probably good for both abutters as it is for the operation itself. It keeps everybody focused.
It also has a level of service stand in it, back to a 2012.
Yeah, it's whatever you had in terms of volumes, amount of equipment, volume of sales. So in this case, if you sold firewood, depending on the volume of sales, if you had retail sales, basically you'd be able to do up to the volume that you were doing, perhaps with some reasonable increase if you can demonstrate to the planning board that increase would be reasonable, or it could be at some lower level if the planning board felt it would need to draw a tighter restriction over a particular type of abuse. It's just sort of an editorial comment aside. It is the approach that Alex takes, and which I think in the time that I've now been doing zoning and permitting in Milton is unique among municipalities. It is much more the standard for a town to simply allow certain types of uses under special permit. And the only criteria is for the Board of Appeals to determine whether the special permit can be granted without substantial detriment to the neighborhood. And that's true of most uses that are authorized by special permit, including, in this case, nurseries in residence zones. What Alex has determined, and I think is probably correct, is that the town needs to have a much clearer sense of what is being requested, what is being put in place, how it's going to be regulated in order for a special permit to be granted and for that special permit to then be regulated. It gives everyone a much clearer sense of what the site plan is going to look like, how the site will be operated, and the rules and regulations that would be applicable. So instead of a half a paragraph. It's 7 pages of single space. But it's I applauded Alex the night of the hearing. It was an incredible amount of work that he put into this. He really listened. He listened to the concerns of all sides. There's still a significant difference of opinion among abutters and others as to whether or not a landscaping business should ever be reinstituted at their nursery. But I think Alex's feeling was that if this had a chance to pass town meeting, then it ought to do so with the types of restrictions and controls that would give the entire town comfort that that the operation would be done appropriately and it would be paying proper respect to the impacts of on its neighbors.
I think we should just talk briefly about, not the substantive issues, because those will all get vetted through the public hearing process, but just procedurally, because we did have a request from another private citizen resident in the town for a different citizen article to be included. So just a few comments on that. Normally, we don't like to reopen and close a warrant, especially late in the game, because the warrant committee needs enough time to, not only the planning board to go through their public process, but for the warrant committee process to take place. And Tom and I can relate to this, having been on warrant committees where occasionally a warrant would get reopened and closed and something added late in the game, and their deadline for going to the printer is next week. So assuming that we were ready to reopen and close the warrant and add this, there will be no time to get a printed recommendation, other than a no recommendation at this time, into the warrant, and that would have to happen later on, and a handout would have to be given at town meeting. But you see, your article, Ned, is at least I don't recall any precedent for this. It's a unique situation where there's already been a citizen's article that was submitted back in January for the annual town meeting. We already have a special town meeting warrant, though it will actually be a combined warrant, but we have a special town meeting within the annual town meeting because of the debt service issue that came up a few weeks ago. So, and Alex, or at least one member of the planning board, has drafted this new article in order to address deficiencies or concerns or questions with the initial citizens petition article. So I think the reasoning for reopening and closing the warrant in this case is different than what another request might be to reopen and close the warrant for a different article. You also have told us you've submitted over 250 signatures. 200 signatures is the amount that you need in order to call for the board to create a special town meeting separately, which would mean a different warrant, more printing costs, mailing costs. So I do support reopening the warrant and including this article in the special town meeting warrant. But I do want to mention we had a citizen article, a request for another citizen article.
Marie, I was wondering if you could bring us up to date on that.
Yes, absolutely. On your agenda on March 4th, you had an opening and closing of a special town meeting warrant. On March 3rd, Monday, March 3rd, we had a citizen come in to request to submit an article for that special town meeting warrant. However, it did not have the 100 signatures required to go on a special town meeting warrant. So we gave the residents some different options that they could do going forward, which was to get the 100 signatures by Tuesday night, and then Tuesday night, March 4th, we could then put it on the agenda, or they could get the 100 signatures and we could place it on a fall town meeting. I did not realize at that time that you would be entertaining this request to open the special town meeting for this particular article, so I did not tell that resident that if she had gotten 100 signatures by March 18th, she could request to put it on.
We didn't know at the time.
Yeah, I did not know at the time, and again, as Selectman Conlon has said, we don't make a history of opening and closing warrants. Once we close the warrant, we usually keep it closed for the reasons that Ms. Conlon articulated. So once this resident found out that we were going to be opening the special town meeting warrant again this evening, she asked that you, the board, again, look at her request to have her article placed on the special town meeting warrant. But again, unfortunately, she did not have the 100 signatures required. So I believe she did email all three of you asking you whether or not you would consider placeholder article for her to, over the next 8 days, secure those 100 signatures. It is the practice of the board not to have placeholder articles submitted. You usually have your article submitted in final form. The second request was that if she couldn't do that, then would the board consider submitting the article itself? I know, as submitted by the Board of Selectmen. I know that there has been discussion at past Board of Selectmen meetings regarding the sign bylaw and your request to have the building commissioner, the town
Yeah, I'd like
administrator.
to speak to that. I
Okay.
mean, what we are talking about is the LED sign, obviously, and a citizen petition to basically ban LED signs within the town, which may or may not have merit. And we said we were going to take it up, and I have every intention of having that happen. But it's a much more complicated issue than just banning LED signs. I mean, there are LED lights in a lot of things, and we really need our whole sign bylaw looked at, and that should be done in conjunction with the planning board. And, I mean, it is basically a zoning bylaw that just happens to come under the purview of the Board of Selectmen. So we are going to take it up.
Yes.
I think we all agree on that. And right now it's just a tough time for us because there's just so many other things going on. But once it quiets down a little bit and we have the, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, we've had some conversation about this. I've actually already started working on a draft of it, but it's something that we're going to need to vet, as you said, through the planning board,
Right.
through town council. The draft that we have, you know, that would raise some questions for me that I don't think that I would support submitting this as a selectman's article, even if we were to consider adding another article at this stage. But I do think that as we go through the process leading up to the October town meeting, we can look at addressing it. That is our stated goal, and
To get something on in October.
yes,
In October.
which would mean submitting it by August for the deadline
Right.
in October, and having the building commissioner and others, especially the planning board, weigh in on potential changes. I do think it's going to take a little time to come up with the right wording and the right article to submit, but Ned's article is in a different situation.
The only other thing I'd like to add to Ned's, it's my understanding too that if we were to kick this down the road to October, it would present a financial hardship to the people involved, and they've got to know one way or the other so that they can.
Yes, and, you know, we were willing to submit this article, Alex's version of the article, for new consideration by town meeting, understanding that it would be presented, that we hope that it will be presented in May. Because of the financial issues, you know, we may have determined that we would just go forward under the article that I presented earlier. We think that's, I still think that's a good article. It's not as good as what Alex has drafted in terms of the overall protections, but this is a better article. And if one ought to pass, I think this one ought to pass. Separate question whether either, at the end of the day, should pass. But this, the town would be better served if this form passed.
So with that said, I will move to reopen the May 5th, 2014 special town meeting warrant to include a citizen's petition article regarding the operation of landscaping businesses in residential areas and to close the warrant.
I'll second that motion.
Motion was made and seconded. Any further comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you.
And number 12 on the agenda is Town Administrator's Report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to update the board on the pilot committee and where it stands to date. We have scheduled for, I believe it's April 7th, a first meet and greet meeting of the pilot committee. And I also received notification, which I forwarded to you, the board, from Curry, thanking you for the invitation to participate and have a representative on your pilot committee. However, they are declining at this time. They feel that they have a pilot program in place with the town that was spelled out in the DOR report, that the DOR report stated was a very good pilot agreement, and they feel that at this time they do not want to participate in the pilot committee.
And it's too bad. I think they could have added a lot to that committee, you know, somebody from CARI, and we did want to get all the major not-for-profit institutions involved. How have we done with?
I am still waiting for a response from Milton Academy. Actually, I'm not sure if the headmaster may be away this, I think it's vacation, because I actually reached out again today with no answer, so.
He was
will
notified
continue.
weeks ago, though.
He was notified, right after you, I think the day after you approved the charge, yes.
And when are we meeting? When is
Your
it?
meeting, the 7th, April 7th.
First meeting.
Yes, and it's a meet and greet. You will, elect a chair for your committee, you'll elect a secretary for your committee, and hit the ground running.
Okay. Well, we look forward to it. Bringing it back to the board. Right. Chairman's report, I don't have anything new to report tonight, so motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned from the open meeting. I'd like to convene the meeting of the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Fund. And at this stage, I'd like to bring up Steve O'Donnell, Chairman of the Historical Commission. And other members of the Historical?
Yes, we do.
Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time tonight. I did come into some information shortly before the meeting tonight, which in some way colors what I'm going to say and what we're going to say, but...
Steve, would you mind just introducing
I'm
everybody at the
sorry,
table?
yes. Linda Weld and Wally Sisson. We felt it was time to approach the trustees about the future of what is going to be left of the town farm and the buildings thereon. Now, we realize that we're not 100% sure exactly what the acreage is going to be, and apparently there has been some discussion about the reuse of one of the buildings. We feel it is important to preserve all of the buildings. The town's owned the property for more than 300 years. Although very little was done with it for the first 100 years, since the early 1800s, it's been actively used. The buildings that are there were used residentially up until, I understand, about 10 years ago, producing income for the fund, which in turn could be distributed to the needy. The assets have lain fallow, they're deteriorating, and producing no benefit to the town whatsoever. We think they can be. We think they should be. These are well-built institutional buildings, and notwithstanding their lack of use, really don't look all that bad, with the exception of the barn stable, which we know is being held up by exterior supports. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the history. Dudley Ladd, another member of the commission.
You're outnumbered now.
Right up, Dudley.
I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the history of the town farm, because I think you're very well acquainted with it.
Yes.
And if you haven't read the Massachusetts Cultural Resources Information System, the MACRIS, information on file at the Massachusetts Historical Society, I recommend it. It's downloadable. I'll be very happy to drop copies off for you if you haven't read it. We have a couple of requests of the trustees. One, we would like to arrange to get in and look at the buildings. Philosophically, we're very much in favor of preservation. We've never been in them. We don't know. We also know that sometimes buildings just cannot be preserved, physically or economically. We realize this. But until somebody looks at these buildings to make that kind of a determination, we don't know. Going one step further, yes, we'd like to see it. We think a professional should look at it, an independent professional preservation architect. And to that end, we would ask the trustees to pursue that. I think you may be aware that And one preservation architect who's currently working at the Wakefield Estate has been informally approached by someone in town who indicated she would be very willing to do it, and indicated that it would probably cost about $3,000 for an initial survey and perhaps recommendations for reuse of the properties. And we think that is a very important step for everybody's sake, for ours, because we sort of want to know what we're fighting for. And as far as the trustees are concerned, it would give an independent appraisal of exactly what's out there. Linda, who is an architect and is very interested in the process, also feels that a professional preservation architect should be involved, and I think you can address that.
I think it's worth having a professional opinion from the outside. And in the case of either Henry Moss or the other name that was mentioned, you can very quickly get, list the tasks of what you want done and what you expect as products, and get a scope of what their cost for doing that would be. But having an outside opinion from somebody who's done a lot of this kind of work is well worth the money.
Steve, would the 3,000, is it just a survey on the 4 acres, or is it on every building on the 4 acres?
The buildings, yeah, particularly the buildings.
Can I just make one comment? And I'm all for historic preservation, and this project certainly sounds worthy. I do have a concern of using Governor Stoughton Fund money, because clearly Governor Stoughton Fund money can only be used for the benefit of the poor of Milton. So you would somehow have to relate the expenditure of this $3,000 to the poor of Milton, and I'm not sure we're there yet. I have no problem if we want to put our selectmen's hat on someday and find another $3,000 to look at, but I don't think we can use Governor Stoughton money for that purpose.
Well, I think we can look into it. I mean, if it's to shore up the buildings for future use for the benefit of the poor, let's explore that. I think we should take what's being requested tonight under advisement.
Yeah.
But the walking tour and the site walk certainly sounds like a good idea that we should set up for the Historical Commission and for us. I haven't been into those
Oh,
buildings
in terms of
either.
a tour, without
Yes.
expending any money, absolutely,
We
yes.
start with that.
Well, I would think, just to take the opposite side, if this money were spent from the fund for the purpose of determining if the buildings were preservable, and we think they are, but we need somebody to officially say that, which would lead to
A low-income-
restoration
for
of the
low-income use.
buildings for affordable housing. I mean, if there were 6 units, and I've heard the figure 8 used in those buildings, if there were 6 units renting for $500 a month.
That would, if you combine it with a plan that, and again, we probably have to pass it off council, I think, but if you combine it with a plan that would tie it into a use that would be consistent with the will of Governor Stoughton, then yes.
Well, if it were affordable housing.
Yes, affordable housing.
Those particular tenants benefit,
Affordable is-
and the fund benefits by collecting the rent.
Yeah, I think we'd have to get some information on that. Affordable housing may or may not qualify as, probably is different than
But
helping the poor.
we got 2 standards in the will. You've got the poor of Milton. So it can't be just
No, I don't think we want to go, I
It's
think
a
we
very
need to get some.
uniquely
some
worded
advice
will.
on those. It's a good point, Tom. I think we need to look into it a little more, but we could certainly
in terms of
start
touring the property
Let's
and
start
that,
with the
yeah,
sidewalk.
Does
certainly.
it make sense if we get in touch with Henry Moss and then the other woman that was named who is involved in the Wakefield estate to come when we go through and just off the cuff say, yeah, you could do this for affordable housing that would bring in income? Because the downside would be if we had somebody come in and say, you really can't do that, and you've spent $3,000 out of the Governor Stoughton Fund that is not going to benefit the poor. But you can get a pretty quick read from somebody who's experienced about what direction to take, and then presumably spend the money to get a real product that
Right.
says this is what could be done.
Would that be acceptable to have someone not affiliated with the town join us on that kind of a?
Well, again, anybody can go on the walk, I think. It's just a matter of expending Governor Stoughton money
Yeah.
on it.
Well, I mean,
So,
you
yes.
suggested we could do it. Would it be acceptable to have an outside person with us also?
I don't see why not.
I didn't see why not, and I'd like to have them open it up to the board, because I probably, depending on what time of the day of the week it is, I might like to join you on it.
Sure.
It sounds like our town planner has some thoughts on this point.
I have been through these houses and the rest of the buildings. I've done it for the Governor Stoughton Land Trust Committee. We did it when we had the RFP go out for what we wanted to do for development on the site. The comment about taking and putting affordable housing at the site, I think people miss the meaning of what affordable housing is, which is why I kept shaking my head no as the conversation went in that direction. Affordable housing is not poor. There's a huge distinction there's a schism between the two. Affordable housing is somebody that has a job, somebody that has a salary. When we start talking about making apartments available to somebody, it may be somebody who doesn't have an income. That would be the poor. That is the poor that is helped right now by the Governor Stoughton Trust. Taking money that is for the poor and putting it into affordable housing, it's two separate deals. It shouldn't be.
But the only thing I would
the same
ask, Bill,
vein.
the only thing I would ask is, again, it's an ancient will, and I don't know that the will defines what poor means.
That's true.
Affordable housing is less than median income.
And that actually came up as one of the.
What's the definition of a word?
Right. That
But I
was.
think also that what Steve was talking about was using the income from affordable housing to aid the poor.
And that we can only do with the Attorney General's consent, because we like.
That's the cypre. That's what is the ultimate plan?
The will says the land must be used for, not the money from the land must be used for.
Oh,
And the
I
Attorney
see.
General has been quite clear to that.
And
Well, is subsidized housing for poor people?
that was a discussion point that went on night after night after night at the Governor Stoughton Trust
When you
Committee.
become poor, if you have a job, are you poor?
Who is poor? What is affordable? How do you
Right.
mix the two
Very
together?
difficult definition.
Your idea of taking and creating affordable units and then using the money to put something back into the estate, that is something that's possible, but again, as Tom says, you need to bring it back to the Attorney General and make sure that they're okay with that. We need to come up with a plan for our 4 acres. We've come up with a plan for the 30 acres, and that's been approved. Now we have to come up with a plan for the 4 acres. When we come up with that plan, we'll add it to the other piece. At that point, it's a good idea. It's something that, there's a little bit of discussion going on that same idea. Can we, should we, how do we? We are talking about that.
I mean, it
How
would
do
be
we
great
make
to see
money?
those assets become productive assets again.
Exactly. How do you make more money for the trust?
What's the stage of your thinking about the 4-acre plan? Is it just total ground zero, blank slate, or are there some preliminary thoughts?
We haven't discussed it yet. The reason we haven't discussed it
You
is
have to wait.
we've been waiting to see what happened on the 30 acres. We've been waiting over a year. We finally just got the approval for the purchase and sale
Right.
of the 30 acres. So we really haven't given much thought to the other 4 at this point.
That's kind of why we're here, because we think it's time to start thinking.
Yep.
Start discussing, finding out what could, and as you suggest, perhaps it couldn't, what could, what should, what would, what might, what is the best use of those 4 acres. Now, I understand there has been some discussion about the reuse of one of the buildings. Why one, not all? If that one, how does that affect what remains? Is that building, could that building be sold to Pulte, leaving the town with the other 3 buildings on whatever number of acres?
Right.
And would doing that reduce the value of what is left?
Right.
For whatever purpose it is used?
So I think what was being thrown around there is perhaps just reconfiguring Pulte's land to maybe include that, but it's hard to say. That's
I
very
think there's a
preliminary.
lot of moving pieces here, and
Right.
it sounds like, I think the site walk is a good idea. I'd like to go on that. Maybe both of you might have already
Yeah.
been out there. I did speak with Bill Ritchie, Consolidated Facilities Director, recently to see if he and I together could go out and look at the site. Because we had emails from former town administrator John Cronin on this very topic and from others, and it's a concern for the Historical Commission. So I think we take the request under advisement. There are some good suggestions. There are a lot of moving pieces, but we start with going out.
We
and all of us-
understand that, but-
All of us looking at it, let's go see what the buildings are. Bill did tell me that he and other members of his staff have been out to check the windows in the buildings to look at what might need to be maintained. So he feels that they are doing that. And
I was there this morning, and considering what's been going on, it's in remarkably good condition, secure. Of course, having the animal shelter there creates traffic and people going by. It's not a truly isolated site. So that's kind of a benefit
yes.
in terms of the protection of the buildings. But, we just thought it was time to begin thinking. You perhaps already have been thinking, but it hasn't.
I think we should explore the question about the use of the funds and get some clear guidance on that.
As trustees and stewards of the property, probably should not let it deteriorate.
Yes.
That this is a historic property for Milton and Massachusetts and maybe the entire country. It may be the oldest poor farm in that location in the entire country. So that as stewards of that property, to say, well, we don't know whether we can spend any money to investigate the real estate of the, to keep it from deteriorating further, doesn't seem to make sense.
We are looking at the buildings, at least one of them, for possible reuse. We wouldn't be selling it to Pulte. We wouldn't be giving it to Pulte. Pulte would have to do the work, and it's per the zoning that is proposed. And if they did, they would have to redo the building, and they wind up giving the building back to the town. No, they would be fixing our building.
Fixing our building.
We would be paying whatever it costs for an affordable unit. I mean, it comes out almost as a wash at that point.
Do they get credit for the affordable units?
Yes,
unit?
yes. They get,
So that they're getting something by doing this.
um,
But they may be breaking up the rest of the property.
absolutely not.
Well, no, because the town would continue to own the property, even though.
The trustees would continue to own it.
Trustees, yeah.
And it is that's part of the conversation that when I have with town council, it is we go back and forth, and we both have to keep reminding the other that there is a distinction between town property and trustee property. And the idea is you need to keep reminding yourself that they are the Board of Trustees, but at the same time, they are the selectmen. It's two separate hats, and they can't, we have found cases where they've done things, and it's not you people, it's much older, that they've done things as selectmen, and they didn't do it as a trustee. So now we're finding that, maybe the trustees did it and didn't tell the selectmen. There's just little things like that that John and I are trying to figure out, okay, what year, how? But we're not, Pulte doesn't get any more land, they don't get anything else. All they're doing is they're abiding by our zoning. It's costing them money to do this. We get something out of it, and it's something on top of the 5 million, on top of the 23 units that they create. And it just because of the way our zoning is written.
Do we give them any guidelines about how they
Yep.
treat our building?
Yep, all the way along the line. Yes, yes, and yes, all the way through. They don't get to do it on their design, it's in concert with us. But they're putting $1 million house in the backyard. They're not going to short shift it.
And again, like I said, it's a discussion for a different time and a different board, but it still would not be inconsistent for the town to spend money on exploring historic preservation. It would be a valid town expenditure too.
Right.
So,
Well, you can use trust property to maintain trust assets, so
Yes.
we'll get some legal questions answered, but you've raised some good points with us tonight.
I am doing that with John Flynn.
The opponents of the Community Preservation Act and former town officials and present town officials said, we don't need the Community Preservation Act because with consolidated facilities, we have preservation money. I don't know where that preservation money is.
I don't know who said that.
You heard that one, Wally?
These are people who were the opponents of the Community Preservation Act, and they said there's no reason, there's no necessity for it, because we have money for preservation. Are you aware of any funds that
No, it certainly
Bill
would be
Ritchie has
consolidated. All consolidated facilities can do is take care of town property, period, not, and there's no historic or.
Can they buy
No,
the Swift Hat Factory? Or
no.
Let me ask you another question, Mr. Hurley. You pointed out very clearly, and I understand trust money for trust property, and you suggested perhaps in another venue, change your hat, now you're working as a selectman. Could town money be spent on trust property?
Well, town money could potentially be spent on historic preservation, I guess, through, you know, I mean.
Even if the town didn't own the property? I mean, again, we're talking town money.
I guess we'd have to explore that.
Trust property. So, because if you really can't use trust money.
It would be a planning effort, so would it be something consistent with the planning, you know, with our town planner and planning?
We can use trust money, I believe, to maintain
maintain
the
property.
assets of the trust,
Right.
so the buildings.
So if we could couch it that way, yeah.
Yes,
Probably.
okay.
Consolidated facilities can charge back to the trust for a broken window,
Okay.
because it's upkeep of the building.
Right.
But if there's a way to do it, we'll figure it out.
We'll get some legal advice and we'll go from there.
Very good.
Great.
All right, if you could
But
keep
in the
us,
meantime, we'll set up a walk.
set up a
Yeah.
walk, that would be, we'd really appreciate that.
And maybe we'll try and invite some people to come and just, you
Walk
know,
with us.
Is a weekend date better for people?
probably
I think so,
so. This spring, you're thinking it would happen fairly soon?
Yes.
Yeah.
April?
Bring some boots and
Yeah.
hard hat.
Yeah.
I've been in there, it's,
I
and a flashlight.
would absolutely not take anybody through the barn. It's just not, it's not safe. If the building inspector was here, he'd say the same thing. You're not entering that building. The
But we
main
could
house,
look in and, you know, you can learn a certain amount just
Pretty
by,
much.
you've got to be very careful on even what side wall you're in. If you're on the side by the animal shelter, okay, but the front part where the front doors are, absolutely not.
It's falling, the slabs are falling off.
It's leaning.
If you were to take off those 2-bys, the roof will implode and go down. It's that heavy, it's that wet. When we went in 5 years ago, the post that holds up the stairs is non-existent. So you have treads that are just, there's nails, then they're just hanging, literally hanging in air. They're one's leaning on the other. There is no post.
Just don't go in there. That's,
I can't, because there's nothing there. It will be a dead.
Why don't we target a Saturday in April? And
sounds good, yeah.
maybe, Steve, maybe your group, I know you have more members than are here tonight.
Yeah.
Maybe you could survey some of your members and come up with a date that works for
Make it after April
everyone.
15th, that's all.
Not April 15th.
No, they-
no.
all right.
Very good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.